When We Disagree is a show about arguments, how we have them, why we have them, and their impact on our relationships and ourselves. Lots of arguments can be classified in one of three ways. We argue over the facts, we argue over our values, and we argue over policy. Policy disagreements concern what we should do about a problem. What should we do as a family about our monthly budget? What should we do as a community about traffic issues? What should we do as a nation about information security on the internet? Policy disagreements are the peak of the disagreement pyramid. If you're pushing a specific policy option, you have to be persuasive on the facts. This is happening or about to happen, and that's bad. You have to be persuasive on the values. We should take an action aimed at increasing freedom or diversity or security or efficiency. And finally, you have to be persuasive on the merits of the policy. The monthly budget adjustment would actually solve a shortfall. Another roundabout in our community would reduce traffic congestion. A new bill would safeguard our personal information on the internet. If you're not persuasive on just one of those issues, your policy argument might be doomed. I'm Michael Lee, Professor of Communication and Director of the Civility Initiative at the College of Charleston. Today's guest on When We Disagree is Emma Tessman, a student from the South Carolina upstate. Emma, tell us an argument story.
So the argument begins for me before it became like a personal issue. I grew up in a really religious household. My parents went to a super religious college. I'm one of the first grandchildren to not go to a Christian college. And so there was stuff that was always being debated around me, as I was growing up, at the dinner table, whatever. And a big no-no was tattoos. They were ungodly. I heard that so much growing up. Anyways, I decided to get my first one, which was actually a Bible verse. It happened to be a Bible verse. But when I told some of my family members, I was met with such disapproval. And they told me that I was sinning and stuff. And obviously that was upsetting to me because I was it's literally a Bible verse. My parents were perfectly fine with it, but this was more grandparents, my aunts and stuff. And I started getting more tattoos, and they just got angrier and angrier, and obviously that upset me too. And they would always reference this verse from Leviticus that says that it prohibits the marking of your skin in the Bible. And they would always say that to me, and so I was under the impression that it was wrong what I was doing, but then I did some more deep diving into what the verse actually means, and that's talking about pagan rituals back in the Bible with different groups of people that would do that to honor people that were dead. They would kind of tattoo themselves, but it's a little more graphic, and it actually wasn't in reference to any kind of tattoos of nowadays. So then when I was I brought it back to them, and I was oh, this verse actually within the context doesn't mean what you're saying it means to me. And then they had no response. So that's
literally no response.
Yeah, she was well, anyways, the other day, and I was no, I brought up a valid point. You've always used this verse against me, and now I give you the context, and you refuse to accept that and tell me that you were wrong about it. So that's the basis of the argument.
So this is a pretty fascinating debate over a modern-ish practice.
Yeah.
And how an ancient text applies to this modern practice.
Right.
So because it can be really broad about how we approach the text, how we interpret the text, what does the text mean?
Exactly.
Or it can be really specific about what does the text say.
Exactly, yeah.
Is that really are there additional verses that could be used to interpret a kind of anti-tattoo agenda?
Another one that I've picked out was that your body is a temple and that you shouldn't be making changes to it, but I kind of I always question how far does that go? Are piercings also a sin? Is changing your hair, is working out to change your body? Are those things also sins then? If tattoos are a sin because that's changing your body, where would you draw the line with that verse?
Right. And what does the temple mean? The metaphor
your
of
body
the
is a temple. You should treat your body your body is a holy place. You should treat it well, and it will treat you well back. But I feel that could apply to anything, the food you eat, whatever. All that kind of stuff. I don't feel that's exactly in reference to tattooing yourself.
Right. If you don't mind, what was the verse you got tattooed?
So I got Corinthians 13:4, and it says, "Love is patient, love is kind, love does not boast." And now I have a couple more. I have another biblical allusion down my back, and it says, "The pain you've been feeling can't compare to the joy that's coming to you." It's another good thing, but obviously everyone was really upset when I got that one too because it was a bigger one. But
Is it fair to assume that you are practicing Christian given these
Yes,
tattoos?
I am. Yeah. So like I identify as Christian, and more than half of my verses are Bible verses. So like I feel like them being upset with me is so unfair because I could be, and also they're all in places that are pretty hidden. Like when I'm in professional clothes or anything, like you can't see them, so it's not like they're like taking away or like unprofessional or anything.
Why is that important in terms of the theological Christian argument?
I feel
the
like
placement on the body.
I personally feel like they're using theological arguments to cover up the fact that they think they're trashy, but they want me to feel like some kind of guilt that I'm like doing something wrong.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like it comes from more of like a personal place in them, but they're like using the Bible because they feel like that'll get to me more. But like I feel like they just think they're like kind of trashy and like whatnot.
Have you been able to get them to, or anybody, and this kind of general them who are anti-tattoo for whatever reason, get anybody to admit that perhaps the motivation is not just textual or scriptural? So
when I was writing because we wrote an essay on this for Miss Baker's class, I called up my grandma, who's like, she's like the main one that disagrees with me. And I was like, will you list out some of your arguments for why you dislike my tattoos? Like, I don't want to fight. I just want you to, like, give me, like, the information. And she started out, like, with more, like, biblical stuff. And then she was like, and honestly, I just think they look bad. She was like, I just think they're trashy. And I was like, okay, there we go. There's, like, the main point. Mm-hmm. Which I guess, like, I could see, like, part of her point because maybe some of the people she knows that are trashy happen to have tattoos, so she automatically assumes that those two have like a correlation, but that doesn't mean everyone that has tattoos is trashy or that everyone who's trashy has to have tattoos. Like, I don't think those things correlate.
The transitive property of trashiness is way leads on to way.
Right.
First comes the tattoo, then comes the trashiness.
Right,
or is it the other way around? Right.
You know, who knows exactly. So I was like, okay, thank you for like saying that. And then she was also talking about how you can't remove them. But now as like technology expands, like there's multiple ways to get tattoos removed. You can do dermabrasion, there's creams you can use, you can have it lasered off, which is like expensive and painful. But if I do want to remove my tattoos at some point, like I could if I wanted to.
Right, which sort of begs the question of whether that is a sin that needs to be washed away.
Right, yeah. I personally, and like my parents have talked about that, and my dad even was a pastor and he majored in theology, and he says that he sees no issues with it, and that the verse that she said, if you dive deeper into like the context of it, it has to do with like all the pagan rituals. It has nothing to do with like tattoos for fun. And some people, even in my family, I feel like would argue that piercings could be a sin. But that's like very strict conservative members of my family. Like my grandma doesn't believe that. But I feel like piercings and tattoos are kind of similar in the way that it's like a pretty permanent change to your body.
Yeah.
And I would disagree that both of those are sin.
Let's broaden out and talk about, because there's so much religious prohibition about the body, what we do to the body, what we do with the body. Yeah. Are there other ways in which this disagreement that sounds cultural, it sounds scriptural, it sounds a little generational, if I'm hearing you correctly.
Yeah, for sure.
What other ways does this show up besides tattoos and maybe piercings? Does it show up in dancing? Does it show up in music? Does it show up in places you hang out?
I feel like, she often comments on like my clothes and stuff and like what I'm wearing is appropriate. And I always just say, if my parents don't have an issue with it, then I feel like you shouldn't either. And like she has like called my mom over and been like, are you really okay with Emma wearing this? My mom's like, I let her out of the house in it. I don't care. And definitely like everyone was a little surprised. I guess this would extend to like school. I did go to like a private Christian school growing up a little bit, and then my parents moved me to public school, and people were a little bit like upset about that as well. And then I didn't choose to go to a Christian university for college. Also, I was met with a little like, people were like, why aren't you going to Bob Jones, which is like the very like strict conservative school in my hometown. And I was just like, I just don't choose to. And once again, like my parents don't have an issue with it, so like I don't really have an issue with it. I feel like my parents are the only ones that could really like speak on it, and I would understand that because they're my parents. But like I don't feel like it's anyone else's spot to say that.
Right.
But
tattoos are such an interesting symbol for many people of individuality, of freedom, of it's my body, but also of rebellion. Yeah. Is there a part of you that felt rebellious in your attraction to tattoos?
A little bit, yeah. I put this in my essay too. I really love to argue, and so I was like, and I'm the oldest grandchild, and so I would consider myself like a lot less conservative than my family, so I would always like to bring up like touchy issues like at the dinner table and see like, which is kind of bad, but as a kid, like I just liked to argue, and I'd bring up stuff that I knew she would like argue against with me, and then we go back and forth. And now I don't do that as much because I don't like to cause issues and stuff, but I definitely like felt like, oh nice, like but I didn't tell her that I got a tattoo for a while, and then I like finally showed her. I also
What prompted you to show her?
I think we were just hanging out one day, and I was like, do you want to see something cool that I got? And then she was like,
knowing that she would not think it was
yeah,
cool.
she did not think it was cool. I also got my nose pierced when I was like 14, and my mom went and got hers pierced with me too. And that was also kind of big that my mom did that, and that I did it too. And also my mom's like in her 40s, so like that was also kind of like, she was like, are you having a midlife crisis? To my mom, she's like, no, I just want to get my nose pierced. And I got my belly pierced too, and that was also like kind of a big deal. But once again, my parents let me do those things, and like they didn't care. And I think
all these actions are targeted in a way provocative towards your grandmother, both from your mom and you, if I'm hearing this correctly.
It's not like I did them to like I'd always wanted these things because I saw them growing up. I thought they were so cool, but part of me knew like that she would be upset. So like, and my dad's parents, super strict. I don't even think they know that I have them, because I know if they saw that I had them, that would be like a really big deal.
You wouldn't say, hey, do you want to see something cool?
No, not for them. Me and my grandma are closer. Like, while we disagree, we have like we're like closer. So I would show her, but I would probably not show my dad's parents because they're super strict.
What's the risk there? That they would cut you out? That they wouldn't talk to you? That they would yell?
They'd probably like write me a letter. There's been time. There's kind of a backstory to that. They are very against like drinking and everything, like completely at all. Not even just being like drunk, just drinking at all. And they had seen one time that we had alcohol at our house, because my dad, obviously he's an adult, like he'll drink sometimes, like have a beer or whatever. And they saw that, and they were so upset, and they wrote a long, I want to say like 5-page letter to my dad about how disappointed they were and how they didn't raise him like this and stuff, and didn't talk to him for a while after the letter.
This is really not important, but I'm curious. Was it handwritten or typed?
It was handwritten. Yeah.
Longhand, cursive,
very
the
long,
whole nine.
Yep. So
mailed in the post?
I think they used to live in Indiana. I believe this was when they'd already moved down. So they probably just put it in our mailbox.
With a series of arguments, or just sort of guilt appeals,
kind
judgments?
Of guilt appeals. It's kind of a reoccurring theme here. But yeah, and I remember that my dad just like calmly wrote back and was like, well, it's, once again, going back, they'll say like there's verses where like drinking is a sin, but there's also the context is important. Like being drunk would be considered a sin. Drinking is not a sin. And Jesus turned water into wine, and like that's like drinking is allowed for fellowship and stuff. If it's in the wrong context, I get that it could be a sin, but just drinking alone is not a sin.
Yeah.
So he also said that to them.
Sure. I'm interested in the ways in which your provocative, the things that you think are cool can also be provocative towards older generations.
Right, yeah.
And then also there are ways in which you could have rebelled that are far more threatening, to be frank, than getting a Bible verse tattooed. So if you had like a list of possible rebellious options, getting a Bible verse tattooed among the
like
most
the least
safest.
Offensive. Yeah, exactly. That's what I feel like.
Yeah. Talk through a little bit of that, because it seems like you're balancing two things at the same time, which is I'm going to express my individuality. I'm going to pursue things that I think are cool or fun.
Yeah.
I'm going to be a free person independent of you.
Right.
I also might poke you as I do it.
Right, yeah.
But I'll do so in a way that maintains our relationship and minimizes the risk to our relationship.
Exactly, yeah. And I feel like while I was maybe more of like a, I guess, rebellious like teenager in my family, there are other things that I felt like I did that kind of like balanced it out. Like, for one, I'm like a pretty good student, like all in high school. And I also like, I love like fellowship with my family. I'm probably the grandchild that hangs out the most with my grandparents. Like even now at college, I text them every week. I try and call them. I would just go visit them like at their house to go like stop by and stuff. I'm always interested to hear her stories. I'll take her shopping sometimes, stuff like that. Yeah. Because like I like hanging out with them, and like maybe the other grandkids aren't as like, I don't know. I wouldn't even consider myself out there, but they would probably consider me out there. Even though the other grandkids are like safer, they don't do those things. So like I feel like it's more acceptable for me to like be more rebellious because we have like a better relationship, I guess I would say.
Mm-hmm.
If that makes sense.
Would you do anything differently in terms of either the conduct, the rebelliousness, for lack of a better word, or the reveal?
I feel like no, because also I feel like it kind of opens her up a little bit, because I wouldn't say that she would see me as trashy. So maybe this will like change her kind of narrow-mindedness that like everybody who has tattoos like is trashy. So maybe I could, and that's what I always try to do is like I'm trying to explain to her like the world is not like it was when you were growing up, and like you grew up in a very small sect. It was like very conservative, and like the world is different now, and that's not a bad thing. Like people are going to be doing things that you might have seen as like absolutely horrible, but that's like acceptable now, and that it doesn't make it bad that it's acceptable now.
Yeah, the adjective trashy is often associated with tattoos, but other things as well, and it's come up a few times.
Yeah.
When you use it, or when your grandmother uses it, or anybody in your family uses it, what do you think they mean by that term?
I feel like she sees it as someone that has like I'm trying to think, like no morals. Probably, like, in her head, what would pop into her head would be, like, someone that lives in a trailer park, has a baby daddy, and, like, has no job. That's probably what she pictures when she sees trashy. I see someone, like, I would consider the word trashy to mean, like, someone that, like, doesn't have morals or doesn't, like, care about what other people think in a bad way. Like, that just is kind of, like, I don't know. No morals, I guess, is what I would say the basis of mine is.
And the morals thing means they don't have a set of ethics or
like
belief system, or they're not Christian?
Like belief system. Like I wouldn't say trashy would be like non-Christian.
Right.
I feel like I've met some pretty trashy Christians. Like someone who just doesn't like, they don't have care for other people's feelings or whatever. Like they just kind of do whatever, and they don't care how it affects the people around them. Like they just have no like obligation to be nice or anything like that. That's what I would consider it like. I feel like it has nothing to do with like your appearance or anything. Like I feel like anyone can be trashy. Like you could be, I don't also feel like it's an issue of like income. Like I feel like a rich person could be trashy just as much as a poor or like low income person could be trashy.
Yeah, often associated with class, often associated with hedonism, certainly associated with appearance, visible appearance to other groups of people, hence the focus on the tattoo, but other things as well. Yeah. But in your interpretation, signifies a kind of lack of respect for others.
Yeah, that's a great word. Yeah, that's what I feel like.
I'm going to do whatever I want, and I don't really care what you think.
Right, but I also feel like it's a mean word, and it has like bad connotations, so I feel like I wouldn't really use that much in like my normal life to be like, that person's trashy. It has such a bad connotation, and it's like people connect it with like class or appearance or stuff, but I don't really feel like that's how I would use it.
As we close, I'm curious to get you to reflect from kind of a 10,000-foot view. What's the lesson here? What's the takeaway from this dispute over to tattoo or not to tattoo, and is that Christian or not?
Okay, so I would say that if people are using Bible verses against you or anything, to definitely like dive deeper and look into the context, because often when people are using those things, they have not looked in the biblical context and they don't actually know what the verse they're using means.
In the original writing.
Right, in the original writing as it is intended to be written. And that you shouldn't have to feel bad for doing things that are more modern if you don't feel like a personal conviction for it and you feel like it's not a bad thing. You shouldn't have to feel guilty for doing something like that. And also that it's good to have these like conversations with people around you. Like conflict is not always bad in family. Like it can be good to try and change opinions, and also like change your own opinion if you feel like you need to adapt it with new information.
Emma Tessman, thank you so much for being on When We Disagree.
Thank you.
When We Disagree is recorded at the College of Charleston with creator and host Michael Lee. Recording and sound engineering by Jesse Kunz and Lance Laidlaw. Reach out to us at whenwedisagree@gmail.com.